Hello, everybody. Hello. Can you hear me okay? All right, not sure about the microphone. I have to stick to prepared statements today, remarks, because I could, if I go off, you could be here for hours. Because my work is so amazing, and I'm so happy to be here to tell you a little bit about it. But also to let you know that I feel that these days the international things that are going on in the international scene actually are very present right here in Milwaukee. And while there's always much work to be done overseas about peace and improving the lives of people living in squalid conditions, much of that work these days has to be refocused back here and locally. And I hope that you understand why I feel so strongly about that. It takes a lot of people to it's really important that all of these expressions of our democracy are beamed out to the world, but it's also equally important that you know how important your work locally can inform that international expression as well. I've come to appreciate that refugee resettlement is not only a humanitarian effort, it really is our international humanitarian expression of our democracy. It is who we are in the United States, who we want to be, who we can be. Open, welcoming, diverse. And I've also come to understand what it means to be truly welcoming. I've learned that I will never be culturally competent. I mean, look at the staff that I introduced you to. Malua and Zara are also sitting at the table here with staff as well. I will never be culturally competent, but it's okay. I've grown to be comfortable with my ignorance, because I can be culturally humble, and I can learn that every day I can learn something new. I also feel that in my work I've also learned what it really, that I really appreciate the true meaning of democracy in an open society. And I'm proud that the United States and Milwaukee since time has offered an open door for the precious few refugees that are allowed in the US each year. But one of the questions that we were asking in our office for the past year and a half is the welcome mat still at the door of the U.S. LSS has had a long-standing history of service to the community since 1884. But since 1974, resettlement became a governmental process through the Department of State, and Lutheran Social Services came on board with that. At that time, though, there were large homogenous waves of refugees. The 1974 process actually opened up to welcome a lot of Southeast Asians. But did you know that with all of everything you're hearing on TV and the radio and media, that the United States accepts over 1 million refugees a year. And when I do community presentations, one of the biggest pieces of information that I'm able to share with people is that they say, oh, but that includes all of these people coming over from Mexico, right? No, it doesn't. 1 million immigrants a year are admitted to the United States, and refugees this year will account for only about 25,000. When you put that in perspective, refugees, that doesn't even put a dent in who needs to come. Now, in 1979, the United States welcomed 200,000 refugees in 1 year. 200,000. This year they're looking at 25,000 if we're lucky. Now, things were done very, very differently back then. But we did that before. I believe that we can do it again. In the past, there were waves of Hmong, Somali Bantu, former Yugoslavians who came in as refugees. They all were fleeing terror, violence, political strife, but they also came in larger waves. Now it is extremely diverse. And since my tenure began at LSS Refugee in 2009, and in response to changing international trends, the populations are really, really diverse and sometimes very challenging. And they're coming from unspeakable trauma and inhumanity. Right now we're seeing people from 5 or 6 different states of Burma. Each one has its own culture and its own language. We've seen Karen, Karenni, Mon, Shan, Rohingya, Karen, Burmans. Am I missing any? I know there's a couple more, but those are the ones that we've resettled. We've seen Iraqis and Afghans, especially SIVs, special immigrant visa holders, who are allowed to come into the United States as refugees because of material support that they provided to the U.S. military. Now, a year and a half ago, I had a really interesting meeting up in Hudson, Wisconsin, in which I walked into a Pizza Hut and entered a meeting of people that were vehemently anti-refugee. We kind of live in a bubble in certain parts of Wisconsin. I was out of the bubble. I missed the bubble. Because they said, I see no reason for an Iraqi to ever come into this country. And I said, what if I told you that one of my staff took a bullet in the face for a U.S. serviceman? And the person said, I don't care. I just looked at them and I said, how can you not care? And he said, I don't care. I don't want to hear it. On January 27th, 2017, the resettlement world abruptly changed with the first executive order and the introduction of what's known as the Security Advisory Opinion countries. And at a time when the U.S. pulled back from refugee resettlement in a huge way, because remember, it's the international expression of our democracy. So when they stopped it, other nations stepped up in really inspiring ways to address the immediate need. Angela Merkel of Germany initially opened Germany's doors wide, and she has borne a lot of criticism since that time. Canada said, we'll take whoever the United States won't take. Right. And after that first executive order, they welcomed 25,000 refugees in a period of just 4 months. Wow. This past August, I was in Norway, and my host told me that they had taken in 25,000 Syrians in 6 months in Norway. You notice that they're going there. The Norwegians aren't coming here. The difference about Norway, however, and this did make me a little bit sad, is that Norway does not offer a concrete path to citizenship. When peace breaks out in Syria, they want them to go back home. That's what makes the United States resettlement much different. I've seen Somali and Somali Bantu, two absolutely distinct groups. They've been living for years, decades, and even generations in crowded camps in neighboring countries. The largest camp is called Kakuma. There's upwards of 350,000 people living in Kakuma. If we take 25,000 people a year, how long will it take us to even help the people in that one camp? We can only do a little, but I think that we still can do more. Iraqis, many of them who gave up very comfortable professional and cultural lives to help the U.S. military, question if they'll be given the promise of support that they were offered when they provided assistance to our military people in Iraq, while they're endangering themselves and their families in their own pursuit and cause of U.S. democratic ideals. Actually have now heard about people saying, I don't know if I want to take advantage of that opportunity to come to the U.S. because I'm not sure what's going to happen to me when I get there. I think that's a very sad state of affairs. Burmese refugees in the many states that they come from have their own language, culture, food. The tales of flight that I have heard coming out of Burma and now with the Rohingya, going into Thailand for those ethnicities has been absolutely stunning to me. Stories that I've heard from Burmese Karen, very reminiscent of the Hmong coming out of Laos into Vietnam. I was told just last week that Milwaukee is the largest Rohingya resettlement site in the country. In recent years, the Rohingya crisis, you've seen it on the news and on TV, it is absolutely urgent and shocking, and it's right here in Milwaukee. I heard a young Rohingya teenager tell a story of her grandfather crying out for help as she fled. Her last look back at her home was a home on fire, and her grandfather was in the second story of it. Rohingya are currently being forced out of Burma and often travel to Bangladesh or Malaysia, where they are illegal, unwanted, prone to arrest and maltreatment, hiding, scraping together the means to buy food and shelter. Those recently forced into Bangladesh are now being given the opportunity to return to Burma since the situation has supposedly calmed down. Just yesterday on NPR, a small boat was reported to have come ashore in Indonesia. They don't even know how long the Rohingya people on the boat had been at sea, but they knew it was a very long time. The Rohingya crisis remains, and we see it in our office every day. I was at a church recently, and I showed a PowerPoint that I use called Refugee Resettlement, Hope and Healing. And another speaker talked about the trauma of Burmese trapped in Burma in camps. And a question came up at the end during the question and answer period about, Mary, how can we help people in Burma? And I was really caught pretty short at my own internal reaction. Because my reaction, I had to watch what I said, because I wanted to respond emotionally, and I couldn't do that. But I realized that I used to hold dear the responsibility for those of us in the US to think of others in conflict areas and do what we could to make their lives better overseas. But this question a week ago made me realize that for me things have changed. How can we help people in Burma when our own local environment and our own government has deteriorated? How can we tackle the myriad immigration issues around DACA, Central America, and unauthorized immigrants when the organized humanitarian effort called refugee resettlement has itself deteriorated?